BBC Essex. 7:37 Saturday morning on BBC Essex. Now, do the short days and those long winter nights affect you?
I must admit, you do get in a cycle, don't you, of not seeing the daylight sometimes. You get up, dark, go to work, dark, and never really feel like you're out in the fresh air.
And it's just that time of year where, before Christmas, I think, as it's getting dark, at least you've got Christmas and things coming up to kind of focus on.
Yeah.
But after Christmas, it's still cold and dark. You're usually a little bit skint as well.
But obviously it is recognised as a condition called Seasonal Affective Disorder, where throughout the year you'll find mentally, but come the late autumn and winter, you get a bit depressed.
Well, the good news, of course, is that we're well past the winter solstice. It's nearly the end of January now, and hopefully moods are lifting. I mean, daylight is increasing. You notice it in the afternoons a bit more now, don't you?
Yeah. It's still
Not
dark
yet,
out there this morning.
Is it?
It's getting there. Carole Sawo is a psychologist and joins us now. She's from Colchester. Morning, Carole.
Good morning.
How common is this seasonal affective disorder?
Well, I think as I was listening to you talk there, I think it's more common in most of us than we might think, with all the reasons that you've just discussed, with the sort of dark mornings and the dark evenings, and then after Christmas a sort of drop in general mood. I think that most of us experience a little bit of it or a lot of it.
And how do you know if it's problematic then? Because, as you say, most people generally feel a little bit down when it's dark and cold and Christmas is over, perhaps. But how do you know if it's something a little bit more concerning then?
Well, if we look in the medical books, it's classified as a mood disorder, and perhaps aptly called SAD syndrome. And the symptoms that they would look for are a persistent low mood and a loss of interest and enthusiasm, and perhaps a bit of irritability. There's also a combination of a desire to sleep more and the craving for carbohydrates. Perhaps I've got a bit of an unusual perspective, but if I look at this psychologically, the back of our brains is still an animal brain, and we are intrinsically linked to nature. The front of our brain, we have something called the pineal gland just behind your forehead, and that regulates our sleep and our internal circadian rhythms. And so, for example, in the summer, when light falls naturally on your forehead first thing in the morning, we would wake up. And in the winter, when darkness falls on our forehead, we release melatonin and want to go to sleep. So it's really quite a natural process to want to sleep more in the winter.
That's very interesting. When it comes to, we've been talking about, when it's affecting you and it becomes a disorder you need a bit of treatment for, what can you do to try and not feel so down, not feel in such a down mood at this time of year?
Yes, well, I think we need to sort of go more with the seasons, because if we study what the animals are doing in the natural kingdom, in the autumn they're smartly gathering food, putting on a bit of weight, and finding a nice nest to curl up in. And then, so the autumn's a time for gathering and stocking up, but winter's a time of restoration and rest. So I think of part of what we can do is really educate ourselves on our natural human rhythms and don't automatically see them that we might have some kind of disorder. For example, in the medical world, they would call it a disorder, but in the natural world, we would just call that hibernation.
But you can't just hibernate away if you've got to work, can you?
We
love
do.
the idea.
I love the idea too. But there are some natural things that we can also do. We can sort of have a change in our perception on what SAD syndrome is. They will tell you that you can buy a light box, and some people sit to have more ultraviolet light on the forehead to sort of wake them up a bit in the mornings. But I think essentially we need to not be so hard on ourselves. And one of the best remedies for combating not only SAD syndrome, but people who are on the sort of depression spectrum, the best thing is to get outdoors, even if it's raining. Go for a walk in the woods particularly. The trees will emit 70 smells. I'm informed reliably in the scientific paper. They're all good for our brain. And so just inhaling the woods and that lovely sort of musty smell that you get there is actually really good for brain health. And people have reported that they've walked off their depression naturally by doing just something 10 minutes or half an hour walk every day.
Well, I've learned something there. Thank you very much indeed, Carole Sawo, who's the psychologist from Colchester. The number of smells coming off, not from your feet, but from the trees in the woods, Ben.